The Supply and Chain Podcasts. We are your hosts, Leo and Kristine.
We are so happy to welcome Mr. Q to our episode today. He's the founder and CEO of premium menswear brand called The Prefecture. He is an entrepreneur and creative visionary. He's a designer and style columnist and just all-rounded smart guy. Welcome, Q.
So we're really excited to welcome Q today to our episode. He's a brand owner, Prefecture, bespoke. Maybe Q, you could bring a little bit up more about the brand itself.
So I'm transitioning into ready-to-wear, but slow ready-to-wear, very slow ready-to-wear. By which I mean I will retain a large component of not a large, but I will definitely retain the made-to-measure aspect of the business for two reasons. The first is that I do think that bespoke clothing in this climate, and also with the kind of clothing that I make tropical tailoring, right? And specifically designed to cater towards people who live in very hot climates. It's not necessary to make bespoke clothing in the tropical climates. You can, but I think the workmanship and the artisans are quite hard to come by. That's the first reason. The second reason for retaining made to measure is, again, it mitigates risk in the sense of you don't have to, you only make things that are ordered. But I am transitioning slowly into ready to wear clothing and products that are going to be sold online in the form of accessories mostly. So things like belts, hopefully sunglasses, things like boxer shorts. And as I evolve and grow the brand, I will start creating things like sort of light footwear, like espadrilles and loafers. So that's the intention behind growing the brand in this way.
Q, do you believe it's possible to achieve 100% transparency across fashion supply chain?
Is it possible? Yes. Is it ideal? No. Exactly. I think it's a strange thing for someone who runs such a small business to say that. But if you're looking at it in purely capitalist terms, it's not ideal to make the entire supply chain transparent because it negates the fundamental foundations of what a capitalist business is about, which is to create maximum margin on the front end, at the end of the supply chain, while incurring minimum costs at the base of the supply chain. So if you make that completely transparent, and so we're already seeing the effects of this. I think the benign effects of transparency are in the form of direct-to-consumer brands. So if you look at bonobos and so on and so forth, and I think recently I came across a really beautiful luxury version of a direct-to-consumer brand. It's called Aurélien. They are a Belgian brand. Really beautiful, clean, elegant clothing. But what I was really intrigued by was their shoe section because of the driving loafer, which looks like the Todd's shoe, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, these look like $700-800 shoes, but they are 165 euros, right? And they look like they're made in the Todd's factory. A friend I know bought a pair and he loves them. And so that's what transparency is creating. It has narrowed that gap between the Hermes driving shoe, which will cost you $1,800, to the Aurélien driving shoe, which looks identical and will cost you 165 euros. That's 10 times less the price. Capitalism is about making a profit while incurring minimal costs. Direct-to-consumer businesses are making very, very narrow margins. It's very hard to see where the profits are being made and distributed.
So if I understand, you're kind of saying that a lot of the fashion industry, all these brands, they build a mysticism behind stuff we don't know, right? We just pay for it and we imagine all this stuff that is happening behind. But what you're saying is by being transparent, you're seeing how things are made. Is like, I don't want, I don't want to pay 100 anymore when I can pay 130. You got to be more. You cannot just hype up your price based on mysticism. Because you're being fully transparent with how you're sourcing, how you're making it, which people can calculate. This is not that expensive.
Precisely. That's exactly what I'm saying. That, I mean, look, like I say, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I just think that, depends on which side of the fence you sit on, right? If you're going to start a direct-to-consumer business, it's definitely good for transparency because you're going to get, if you market it cleverly enough, it's in your best interest to be transparent because what you want to do is take market share from the luxury brands, right? Mm-hmm. However, as I say, in the long term, it's just not a viable model because with those narrow margins, how much can you grow?
You're talking from the marketing perspective. Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. However, if you have a transparency for your own sake, whether it's Inditex having their internal transparency from the raw material down to their retail analytics, what is your opinion whether that's actually even possible to do, to reach that in B2B level, not necessarily going marketing yet?
Transparency on a B2B makes sense, but complete transparency for B2C doesn't make sense, even for me at my small size of the brand. And I'll tell you this, it's because most of my clients, right, come here initially because they want to get nice clothes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what ends up happening is that the more they come here and engage with this small boutique brand, they become invested in the story. They become invested in the feeling of coming here, right? Leo, you mentioned the mysticism. You mentioned the word mysticism. There is a value in remaining mystical in the process of designing for someone, because once they know everything, a certain level of respect is lost, right? They know everything, and when they wear that shirt, they just don't wear it with the same level of respect. That's why big brands do as well as they do, because mysticism still works very well.
So question number 2. What is your favorite myth about the fashion supply chain?
So I work for a huge online startup called Zalora, right? And the myth about large companies and about one of the biggest myths is that the more money you get, the more the better you function. You need to understand just what the adequate amount of money is in order for you to launch a startup efficiently. So I think what happened with Zalora was that when I got there, they were about 2-3 years old, I believe. This is like 6-7 years ago. Was that they got so much startup money, like a lot of startup money, that the money negated efficiency. Instead, what it did was it put them under the pressure of looking like they were spending on marketing and hiring a really, really inflated workforce. The burning rate was unbelievable, right? And I just couldn't understand that. And I remember just thinking, if you really want to run a very successful, efficient, you can start big-ish, but I think you don't need to start with more than 25 people. So one of the biggest myths is that more money means better operations. It just doesn't. I think the less money you have, sometimes you force entrepreneurs to be much more resourceful, to be much more innovative. You force them to be much more efficient. Yeah.
So it's a matter of like growth, and then you get enough funding to go to the next level. And what is happening lately in startups is that they get all this cash in, and their operation is not ready yet for that. So they just grow in a very messy way. Like they're like rich kids, like they just inherited all this money, and then like just.
That's really, I think, one of the greatest poisons of the sort of like the startup culture of the last 10 to 15 years. Which is, I've got a very serious bone of contention about the fact that how do you justify giving, say, for example, $12 million for a company that has existed for less than 6 months, right? Yeah. How do you justify giving them that amount of money? And then, of course, one of the smartest capitalist strategies is when such VCs will say, okay, we'll give you $3 million at in your seed stage, right? You're maybe you're at seed, the first round of seed funding, right? They give you $3 million and they only take something like 6% equity, right? That's I think as a capitalist, that's incredibly smart, because if you give them $3 million for only 6%, you inflate the value of that company insanely, right? So right there, you're onto a winner if these guys survive for the next 5 years, because all you want to do is sell your 6% to the next fool who's going to buy it for $20 million, right?
So you're creating the hype that there's a reason why they're going to lose money.
Yeah, you're building this bubble, right? And so for me, I'm very disturbed by that, because it is not a culture of growing companies because they have purpose or because they have a great reason to be. right? It's literally funding companies because, hey, you know what? Let me just try and do a Peter Thiel like he did with Facebook, right? Put in $500,000, and by the time Facebook IPO'd, his $500,000 was worth $6 billion, right? Everybody wants that because it's just about money. So there's a really poisonous and toxic funding culture in the world.
Okay, but I have a question from the other perspective. What do you see as one of the most innovative fashion initiatives, startups recently in the market?
A brand called Frank and Oak.
Okay.
Yeah. A brand called Frank and Oak. I think one of the, I don't know if it's new, I don't know if it's, but I do think it's incredibly smart, which was this, is that they had something like 17 or 27 stores across Canada. But you can't buy anything in any of the stores. It's simply a showroom where you go in and you hang out and you get a feel for the brand. So you actually experience the brand in these showrooms. You don't buy anything. Or if you buy anything, the shop assistants will ensure that they have to steer you to using the iPads to purchasing that shirt online. So on the rack, you are only seeing samples. You've got 27 stores across the whole country. But all the orders are coming from one place. I think that's an incredibly efficient model. I love that.
Yeah. What has been your biggest failure, challenge, and what are the main learnings from that?
Automation has been my biggest failure because considering the fact that I measure people all the time, and I keep data and store it in a certain way, right? I have failed to capitalize on that data, and from the perspective of using it automatically, from the perspective of knowing how to use it efficiently in order to be able to encourage clients and customers to buy more frequently. That's definitely been a failure in the sense that I actually 3 years ago met up with a software developer, and we developed a platform, a software platform where I would record all the measurements right onto there, and then once recording all the measures, I would write down all the details of each person's order. If someone came in and ordered 2 shirts, I would create order sheets for each garment that they ordered. And then at the end of it, with the measurements taken, the raw measurements and the garment details, at the end of that, I was supposed to create an automated version that would convert the raw measurements to the final garment measurements, and it would go directly to the manufacturer, right? And just trying to create a synergy between myself and the manufacturer and getting them to be able to sign up to that platform and record all their data on there as well was just a no-go. It was just very, very difficult. Because when you're a small business and your supply chain is comprised of smaller businesses as well, it's very difficult to convince people to automate their systems. People are very used to working in an old way, and they don't want to innovate.
I mean, that happens at every level, right? In different scales of companies and all industries. But I'm curious, as I hear your story, considering the size of your brand and your business, which one do you consider will be like the technology or the system that will help you the most at your level? Because we already discussed that, okay, for your size, you don't want to bring a massive system and people have to do some admin work. But now also you're saying, hey, I have a way to make this faster. It will really help me. So from all the systems or maybe like automations that you can think of for your size, which one do you think is the most valuable?
Innovating on micro efficiency, and by that I mean I go back to the data that I collect, right? All the measurement data. If I were to be able to correlate that information to start creating predictors sizes, essentially, right? So that every single time a new customer comes in, I don't have to, and I take their measurement. I don't have to make a new garment, a new test garment every time. Right? That's one. Number two, that data could also be used as a predictor. And I actually tested this, and it worked really, really effectively. I remember I had about maybe at the time about 50 clients, and I took 12 of the highest spending guys, right? Highest spending and the most frequent returners. So these were guys with 5 or more orders in after a year, right? So if you go to a tailor at 5 times a year, that's a lot. Because each trip, with me anyway, you're spending $1,200 to $1,500, and if you do that 5 times a year, you're very high spending, and so what I did was I tested with 10 or 12 of those guys, because with 5 orders in, I could predict what they liked. I knew them well enough on a personal level to know what they wanted and so on. So I started using that data from previous orders to send them what I called a style lookbook based on what I thought they might want next. So I would create with an intern a Photoshop book with a bunch of fabrics, taking really nice detailed pictures with some stylish images of guys dressed nicely on the left. I sent those out to them, right? And each booklet would have, let's say, 6 looks, right? And of those, each look is comprised of 2 fabrics. So there's 12 fabrics. And on average, I was selling at least 50% of the book. And I was only sending it by email without having to meet the client.
Like a mail order.
It was precisely that. Because after 5 orders, they knew me, they trusted me. They were like, okay, Q's clothes fit really well. And he's proven that he can style me very well. And he's proven that he's got a variation of product. So if I send you something by email, and I, as a suggestion, and your name is attached to this lookbook, and this is a personalized lookbook for Robert Smith, right? Then you would receive it and say, hey, I love this on page 1 and 2. I like the items on the last page, right? And I would split it into half, three quarters of the book was formal clothing, and the last quarter was casual clothing. And we had a really, really successful sell-through rate. And I did that for about 3 or 4 months. But I fell off the wagon with that because I'm such a lean operation. After some time, I lost the one who was doing it, and I couldn't pick it up. We didn't automate that process. So for me, it's micro automation to create micro efficiency.
You know, and you're busy with your day-to-day activities, but how do you continue to learn to keep up with the things that's going on in the industry? How do you stay on top of things?
At my size, the most important thing is to keep your ear to the ground with what's going on with my supply chain. It's in your best interest to know your supply chain as personally as possible, because when they have a personal effect happening to them, it has an impact on you. So if there's one thing I continue to learn is to keep communication on both the professional and personal level with my supply chain.
That's targeting the business. Do you have any external influences? Do you look into like Draper's, Business of Fashion, Sourcing Journal, or it's not necessarily a priority in your like weekly?
Oh no, I'm constantly on Business of Fashion. I'm signed up to Business of Fashion. I'm signed up to something called TAF in Singapore. It's called the Trade Association of Trade and Fashion Federation in Singapore. And they keep me in the loop. And they've recently connected me with some manufacturers of, because I'm looking to go into ready-to-wear. So I want to start looking at polo shirts and T-shirts. So they've connected me with a manufacturer. And Business of Fashion, I stay right on top of it. I follow blogs and I follow their Instagram page. I'm constantly looking at what's happening in the grand scheme of things, the big fashion picture, to see what the impact might be on the lower end of the scale.
Do you follow more of a US market or European UK market, or that's just like a global scale?
I tend to filter and read what's relevant to me if I can get it. So on Business of Fashion, I tend to look very closely at any reports about, let's say, funding in tech in Asia. Let's say new brands in Asia, any conglomerates that are rising in Asia. I tend to take a close look at them just to see if they may be in Singapore, or to understand where the funding trend might be in VC, where the VC trend is facing as far as brands and investment across Southeast Asia.
I want to thank you for joining us in this interview, and so it's been a great opportunity to talk to you very much.
No, thank you both for even asking me to come on to this. I really appreciate it. I hope I was clear. I hope I didn't ramble on and deviate too much. And like
it's
I said,
fun. Editing takes care of that. Don't worry.
And I'm open to being educated. I'm constantly looking to pick brains like yours and Kristine to understand what to do better. Because I think on the branding and marketing, I don't want to say I've got it down to, I've got it locked down. No, but I just know that on the branding and marketing, I have a good understanding of what I want for my business. But it's just on the growth aspect, the logistics, the supply chain viability, the logistics and growth, one brand I'd say I love as well, you asked me this, it's a shoe brand called Bourdain and Langer. They're in the UK. They only make one type of shoe, and it's called a Belgian loafer. They're called Bourdain and Langer. They have grown phenomenally. And from where I'm standing, if I look at it purely as a business, they are perfectly positioned in the last 2 or 3 years. They have positioned themselves so well to be kind of like the next Jimmy Choo, by which I mean they're going to be funded, if they're smart, they're going to be funded by a big VC, or they're going to be acquired by a big conglomerate like Kering, Richemont, or LVMH. Because their product is beautiful. It's very expensive. It's incredibly well made, but they are growing quite well.
Yeah, we can leave all of that in the comment section so everyone can check it out as well more. And of course, your brand is pretty amazing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Or not, I don't know what.
No, I will not. It's okay. So I should we start again?
Yes.